God is the master of the ricochet. Sometimes we want to be so obvious and see God working in such a direct way, but God has all sorts of tactics to use, and one of the most famous in the Bible is the story of Joseph, where we read Joseph responds to his brothers by saying, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day," notice, "to save many people alive." So not only did God neutralize the efforts of Joseph's brothers, first of all to kill him and then sell him into slavery, or the efforts of Potiphar's wife to frame him, or the story of the butler who forgot him, it wasn't only to neutralize that and to save Joseph's life, but also, as he says, to save many people alive. This is the wonder of God. He is such a good businessman. He can take what other people would take as scrap and turn it into eternal product. So let me tell you a story about a trip I took years ago to Vancouver. I was spending some time with the director of the Union Gospel Mission. He had told me some marvelous stories while I was there. The story of one young man, I think his last name was Esau, who had been converted at the mission and had told his father about his conversion experience, and his father said, "I've heard this story 1,000 times. I won't believe unless I see a miracle." Well, it turned out that a short time later, when he was at the mission, there was a scuffle and he got in the way, and a fellow stabbed him in the back with a knife. They rushed him to the hospital, and as the doctor was cleaning out the stab wound, he discovered a fast-growing cancer right at the spot where the knife had gone in. And the Vancouver newspaper featured the story with the one-word caption, "Miracle." We went around the corner from the mission to a Goodwill store that the mission ran, providing low-cost products to the poor and indigenous people of the area there. And we were introduced to a young lady working behind the counter, and I believe her name was Rachel, and the director said, "This is a friend of mine, would you share your testimony?" And so she did, and she told the story that she and her husband had actually worked for the mafia there and ran a drug and prostitution ring in the city, and none of this bothered her until one day her boss called her in, gave her a gun, and told her that she had to go and kill a prostitute who had double-crossed him. And she couldn't do it. And she wandered the streets in the rain, contemplated suicide, thought about running away, didn't know what to do. In the evening, as the city grew dark, she was coming down the street and she heard singing from this building, and she stepped into the entryway to get out of the rain and was drawn in to listen to the gospel message that night at the mission. Sitting there in her seat, she thought, "This is what I need," and she put her trust in Christ. She didn't tell anyone. She went back out into the rain and made her way to the apartment where this prostitute lived that she was supposed to kill. And she was received into the apartment. The girl knew her well. She sat down on the bed, took the gun out of her purse, laid it on the bed, and said, "I was sent here to kill you tonight, but I couldn't do it." And she told the story, how she'd been converted. And she said, if you trust Christ, he'd do the same for you. And within an hour or so of her trusting Christ herself, she led to the Lord the woman that she was supposed to murder. And she said to me, "Would you like to meet her?" I said, "I sure would." She said, "She works downstairs." And we went down, and here was this woman sorting clothes at the rescue mission. It just brings again to our minds the fact that someday when we hear the whole story, we will be absolutely overjoyed. We'll be flabbergasted. Not only that God neutralized the forces of evil against us, but he was able to take the moves of the enemy and divert them in such a way that he accomplished great glory through it. And so this is the wonder. Thanks be to God, who always leads us in triumph. We don't always see the triumph. We don't always see the end of the story. But let's have confidence in God, a God who can do this for Joseph, or who can do it for that dear woman in Vancouver, or who can do it for you and me. So the God who began the story is the one who writes the last chapter. And we're just so grateful to see how God is the master of the Ricochet.